Hi, everyone. As you'll see, I am not here today. I want to go over a little bit about um, the material on the study guide. And so you kind of talk you through it. So you can watch this, you can go up the study guide. A reminder that we have a quiz tomorrow, and it will cover just the stuff on the study guide, not the sectionals and stuff or stuff before that. So let me go ahead and share my screen really quick, and then there we go. All right, so let's start with the warm-up. The question is, why did Thomas Jefferson believe that Missouri Compromise was the death knell of the Union? All right, I hope you oops, to watch that on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the warm-up, just to sort of talk to you about it for a second. Jefferson thought that because we're now sort of formalizing the division between the North and the South, this would deepen the divide and would be really bad. Now, it took 40 years until the Civil War happened, but it is something that, went on. So Nat Turner's Rebellion. As you'll see throughout this, there are some videos. I'm not going to play them during this recording right now, but you certainly can watch them. I encourage that. They're really good. Nat Turner was a slave in Southampton County, Virginia, and which is in the very, very, very southern part of the state of Virginia. And in 1831, he and his sort of followers, he was a preacher, rose up and killed the plantation owner and families, and between 55 and 65 other people, most of whom were white in the area. And they did this because, if they're slaves, they were protesting slavery, but they had no really other recourse. It's not like they could protest peacefully. They were slaves. The result of this, unfortunately, was some unintended consequences. First, Turner is executed. Southern state governments cracked down even harder on enslaved people. There's no education, no ability to gather. There's increased security on plantations, meaning it's not like they could leave. It was very highly regulated. So it actually made life worse for most slaves. Remember, this is 1831, so we're now 30 years before the Civil War. The next thing on the study guide, I just want to kind of talk it through, is the Wilmot Proviso, which is an addition to a law proposed by David Wilmot. It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall ever exist in any part of the territory. And the territory he's talking about is this right here. It's called the Mexican Cession. It is what the United States took from Mexico during the Mexican-American War. And this was, a huge amount of territory. While we don't not care about Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, it's California that's going to be the big issue. One major reason for this, and I'll talk about this on the next slide. So the Wilmot Proviso tried to limit the spread of slavery. This was, of course, bitterly debated. No one had small feelings. Everyone had really huge feelings about this. It never passed. The Senate could never get its act together to pass it, even though it was, had support from all the anti-slavery states. And this is going to become much worse because the next year in 1849, which is, of course, why the San Francisco football team is called the 49ers, there was a gold rush. Gold was found in California, so the population of the state explodes, meaning the next year in 1850, California wants to join the Union. Great, but how's it going to come in? It's going to be a free state. It's going to be a slave state. What are we going to do? And of course, the United States government wanted to keep it even. So California comes in as a free state, as you see. The Utah and New Mexico territories, they allow slavery, meaning they were going to decide for themselves in a term called popular sovereignty. I'll talk about it on the next slide. But also there was a major fugitive slave law that I'll talk about. So I'll give you a second on this slide. So California is a free state, a much more effective, harsher fugitive slave law that set punishments for anybody in the North who did not return slaves to the South. And this issue of popular sovereignty, which means that term means that the people of a unit, meaning a region, a state, or a territory, whatever, would get to decide for themselves about slavery. They would take a vote, which seems great, except for the fact that, hey, people have some negative feelings. People in the North were outraged by this because they did not want to have anything to do with slavery. You see that there's a protest. It's without arms, so it's not an armed protest. There's a video here. I'm going to skip it, but you should watch it. It's really good. It's about the Compromise of 1850. The next thing I'm setting out is Uncle Tom's Cabin. We've talked about this already, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it. But it was written in 1852 by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was a novel, so it's fictional, but it was close enough to reality that it gave people the understanding of what was going on. It showed how evil slavery was. It was clearly not popular in the South, though it was read. It wasn't ignored by the South, but it was not popular, which I think you can certainly understand. All of this is sort of a predecessor to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of Bleeding Kansas. This divided the rest of the Louisiana Territory, which hadn't become part of states yet, into the Kansas Territory and the Nebraska Territory. Slavery would be decided by popular sovereignty, so these two territories would get to vote for themselves, despite the fact that they're well above the 36-30 line. How did the anti-slavery and pro-slavery forces react to this? Does this violate any compromise? Yes, it violates the Missouri Compromise pretty significantly. So popular sovereignty, I already talked about this, but you should see, it's when voters in territories would decide whether they want to ban or allow slavery. I'm gonna keep going. You have access to these Google slides. So if you want to go back to it, when I'm done, you certainly can. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces rushed into Kansas, wanted to make sure that they win the election. We have border ruffians from Missouri help, the pro-slavery side. Remember, Missouri was a slave state. And you see this is the pro-slavery flag, anti-slavery abolition flag. Both sides are having weapons. And I think I skipped a slide. Yeah, pro-slavery forces win, excuse me. There's a lot of harsh laws passed that require people you can't question slavery in the Kansas Territory. There's the death penalty for helping fugitive slaves. And then we get a split state. The territory divides into two different governments. There's the government in Topeka, a government in Lawrence, and they're going to fight, which is where we get here. They start stockpiling weapons. John Brown, this is who we had talked about in the abolitionists, enters here, and he is he's a major abolitionist, and he and his sons and their followers they tended to use violence as a weapon. Well, I guess that makes sense. Violence as their tactic. We saw this painting last week. He said, "It is time to strike terror in the hearts of the pro-slavery people. If it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice and mingle my blood further with the blood of my children and with the blood of millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and most unjust enactments, I submit, so let it be done. This sort of, so that we got is bleeding Kansas. Some sources say about 200 people died in a month. That's a lot of people in a very small territory. This shocks the country. No one had expected this kind of thing, which means the country was much closer to the edge of having, a civil war than people expected. Not great, not great. This sort of violence and antipathy and antagonism spills over to the Senate. So Charles Sumner, who you see there on the left, was an anti-slavery senator. On the right, you see Senator Butler, who was from South Carolina, clearly a pro-slavery. Sumner does not think highly of Butler, and he says, but the senator touches nothing which he does not disfigure with error. Sometimes a principle, sometimes a fact. He shows an incapacity of accuracy, whether in stating the Constitution or in stating the law, whether in the details of statistics or the diversions of scholarship. He cannot open his mouth, but out there flies a blunder. He continues, Senator Butler has chosen a mistress, the harlot slavery. So obviously these are harsh terms. And Senator Butler's nephew, a member of the House of Representatives named Preston Brooks, comes into the Senate chamber. And he says, you've libeled my state and slandered my white-haired old relative, Senator Butler, and I've come to punish you for it. And he beats Sumner with a cane, which we see right here. It's a heavy sort of wood cane with a gold tip, and it doesn't kill Sumner, but it does wound him. And I think it's more important to realize, look, this is not a sign of a healthy functioning democracy when there is actual violence on the floor of the legislature. We, in 2021, we see this in other countries, we see this in other parts of the world, and we sort of look down on it, we disdain it. This happened in the United States. You'll see in one of the videos earlier that previously in the 1850s, there's someone that brought a gun to the floor of the Senate. These are troubled times. Speaking of which, this leads us to the worst Supreme Court decision in history. I really encourage you to watch this video. It does a really good job of laying out what happens. But briefly, Dred Scott was an enslaved man born into slavery in Virginia. He was sold to a man in Missouri, meaning someone in a slave state, moved with his owner to a free state where he was free. Then moved back to Missouri where he sued for his freedom, saying he was free, he should not be enslaved once more. The decision, coming down from a 7-2 vote, said Dred Scott could not sue for his freedom because he was not a citizen and had no rights. Furthermore, he, like all African American people, were slaves, were property. And Chief Justice Taney goes even one step further than that, saying that the Missouri Compromise itself was unconstitutional. Slaves were property. The federal government had no standing, no right to take away anybody's personal property. This is widely regarded as one of the worst, if not the worst, Supreme Court decision in history, which I think we can understand. This is Roger Taney. Not a good person, not someone you would be proud of. Also, he looks like a skeleton. All right, John Brown in 1859 comes back. He now is taking part in action in Virginia. And he has this whole plan that he and his sons and his followers, including both white and black people, were going to raid a federal arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, which is now West Virginia. Just to be clear, an arsenal is a place where weapons are stored. And they were going to take these weapons and give them to slaves to help them, foment a revolt and uprising. And that's great. He's an abolitionist. We want to encourage that. The planning needs something to be desired. The plan does not succeed. They break into the arsenal super easily. They had no real plan to break out, and they're pretty easily captured / killed. All his sons were killed. That's a great video about it. He is himself arrested, charged with treason, and executed. So not optimal. Which finally brings us to Abraham Lincoln in the election of 1860. Lincoln, who you've probably heard of before, and if not, I certainly have to have some harsh words with your elementary school teachers. He was born in a log cabin in Illinois. He was a lawyer, a member of the Whigs and the congressman, member of the House of Representatives. When the Whig Party, which is the anti-slavery party, kind of imploded, it became the Republican Party, which is also the anti-slavery party, and he was its leader. In 1858, he ran against Stephen Douglas for the position of senator from the state of Illinois, and he lost. But these, just as an aside, these debates that they had between Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln were so well regarded that the whole discipline within the debate that we do in schools is called Lincoln Douglas, and it requires strong substantive arguments, listening to your opponent and then responding. It's really nice to see. In the presidential election of 1860, there were 4 candidates: Abraham Lincoln versus 3 pro-slavery candidates, Breckinridge, Ball, and Douglas. I don't need you to know their individual political parties, just that they're all basically pro-slavery. Lincoln understood that one section of our country believes slavery is right and ought to be extended, while the other believes it is wrong and not to be extended, meaning the country is hopelessly divided. There is no possibility of compromise between people who do not believe in owning other individuals and people that do. Those are mutually exclusive positions. Lincoln wins. He carries all the states in red, which makes sense. And the other 3 candidates, all the pro-slavery candidates, basically split the vote. So none of them wins. In the North, this is viewed as great news. You have a sort of somebody who might be viewed as anti-slavery as the president of the United States. But in the South, not viewed as great news. We're going to start seeing states leave. We're going to start seeing states depart from the Union. And this is how they do it. It goes in from South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, where the capital of the Confederacy is, then Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. You'll see in these dark pink states, they're called the border states. These are states that have slavery, but don't leave the United States. They're still part of the Union. All right, guys, I want you to spend the rest of the period working on the study guide. Remember, it is due tomorrow. You will have a quiz or some sort of assessment tomorrow. I am reachable all day on Canvas or on email. Please reach me with any questions you have. I'd be happy to answer them. Please be respectful of each other. If you finish, you can certainly work on anything else. Other than that, I will see you on Friday. All right. Have a good one.